It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege and honor of interviewing the Maine BlackBears assistant track and field throwing coach, Coach Brian Woodbury. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in coaching and college track and field?
Well, coaching college is always kind of a long-term thought and goal. I never really thought it would actually happen. I was pretty much just built on the idea of having a career. And I mean, I worked for Apple and Bank of America, so I always thought I would kind of climb the corporate ladder. Then I started private coaching, and within a couple of years, it turned into an opening at my alma mater, and I pretty much just took a leap of faith and made it happen. It was something that I thought I would do probably in my mid 60s, but now I'm 32, and I don't know, the universe just kind of lined up for me to do this.
How was your experience like getting to compete as a track athlete for the Maine BlackBears?
Well, for me, being from Maine, it was a pretty special opportunity, and that's something that for other athletes that have competed for Maine, it really is a privilege to wear the black bear head. It's a privilege to wear the state on your chest. Like, those are things that were really special to me as an athlete, and definitely something that I know our student athletes now get to experience. It's really a great opportunity.
What was that experience like getting to put on that uniform, that track uniform for Maine and getting to represent the state of Maine?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of expand on that, it's really hard to describe. It's a really special feeling, especially in track where you do so much either interstate travel, compete with people all around the world and around the country. And it's pretty rare to actually compete for your state university. There's a lot of people that actually, bounce around the country, want to check out somewhere either warmer or colder or whatever, just see something different. But to actually wear your home state where you grew up and your friends and family live, it is pretty special to have those memories captured with a black bear head or the state of Maine.
Being in college, what was that experience like being a thrower for Maine?
I mean, throwing for Maine, so my story is a little weird. I played college football first for 2 years. I played Division II, and then it wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I ended up transferring, and I transferred to the University of Maine. So I only had 3 years to compete in college. So I had a pretty abbreviated uh, collegiate throwing experience, but I made the most of it, and I loved it enough where I got to return to the University of Maine a bunch of years later and give back to the program, and that's really important to me, and it's because I want to be able to give our student athletes the same or a better experience than what I had when I competed here.
What was that transition like for you? As you said, you played college football and then you went into track and field as a thrower.
Well, it was interesting because I threw in high school, and it was something that I didn't take super seriously. It was more like whatever, you're a big, strong football player, you can throw a ball far. And I just kind of did it to keep me busy, I guess. And it didn't really become a passion for me until, I don't know, it's one of those things, I guess, where when you let it go, you kind of realize you started to miss it. And that's kind of what happened for me. Is 2 years into college football, it wasn't what I wanted. I joined the club track team. They didn't have a varsity team. So I just like picked up the shot again, started throwing, went to a bunch of open meets. I was pretty competitive with a bunch of the people in New England and some of the other Division I schools. And I just kind of said, screw it, I'm transferring. This is what I want to do. And I transferred home to the University of Maine, and yeah, had the 3 years to do it.
How was that experience like for you to get to throw as a shot putter?
Well, shot put is for people that don't know, at least for college men, it's a 16-pound ball. So it's a very, very heavy rock, if you will. And it's a very technical sport. It requires a lot of speed, strength, power, all that kind of stuff that would go into, other I guess call it power and strength sports like football. So they tend to blend. A lot of throwers tend to play football and vice versa. But it was a very great experience. I went through a lot of technical transitions, a lot of learning. I had a lot of great teammates and coaches around me, and that's really where I've gained my technical base and knowledge from.
What was some of your accomplishments as an athlete for the Maine Black Bears?
At Maine, let's see. I think my biggest ones were I was all conference in shot and disc. So and having that short career, I was really glad I was able to at least climb the charts a little bit. I finished second in discus and third in shot put, so that made me all conference. Outdoors my junior year. Unfortunately, after that, I herniated a disc in my back, so that kind of threw me backwards a little bit. So that was hard to come back from my senior year, but those were pretty much the two highlights to be able to compete within the America East on a pretty short stint and still be able to have an impact for my team was pretty special.
Coming out of college, what was your experience like getting into coaching and going to your high school alma mater to get started in your coaching career?
Yeah, so coaching, so my high school was Scarborough High School. I pretty much started volunteer coaching there pretty much right after I graduated in 2009. I think a big reason for that was my high school throws coach was Kurt Damon, and he always welcomed me back and wanted me to be around. My little brother was competing at the time, so it was just kind of a fun way to give back. Again, never thought anything would come of it, but I coached at Scarborough High School, I think for like 8 or 9 years. So I was there for a long time, just like as a volunteer in the background, just helping out when I could. Like when I would come home for either winter breaks or spring break or whatever, just finding a way to contribute and give back. And that was another really rewarding experience.
What was that experience like getting to coach on the high school level and getting to coach throwing on the high school level?
Yeah, I mean it's challenging, and that's part of why I think I went down the private coaching route out of high school. So I mean, for me as a competitor and someone that really enjoys competing, where I also enjoy developing, of course, but I think when you're coaching at a high school team, if you have like 30 kids that are throwing, it's very hard to actually build a program that way. But I mean, at Scarborough High School, we were super successful as a team, won a whole bunch of state championships. And our head coach was Derek Vayu. He still is there. He's been hyper successful. I think he's at double digit state championships now as a team. So he's absolutely killed it there. And being able to kind of give back to the program. I mean, my senior year in 2009, yikes, we won the state championship indoors, and that was his first. So it's been fun to kind of be there and see it all the way through until I started private coaching. But yeah, definitely challenging. I mean, the biggest obstacles with development in high school is you have whatever in Maine, on most states, there's some sort of governing body that kind of makes rules. And I think that was one of the frustrating things for me as a coach that wanted to coach. There were times of the year where they wouldn't allow you to. So it's like if you wanted to work with the throwers in the off season, you just couldn't. And that made, developing and wanting to, path toward either championships or college or whatever really hard. And that's kind of what bled into the private coaching idea.
Of course, what was that like getting started and building your own program and business, the Slingshot Athletics?
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the brainchild of the issues I was experiencing coaching high school. I mean, I pretty much just randomly decided to launch it. I remember I was coaching at Scarborough and I had a couple kids qualify for the New England Championships and went down to that and realized that there are a lot of people, and I've always known this, but I think that's when it really hit me. Like there's a lot of athletes with a lot of talent that don't have coaches in high school. And that's just kind of unfortunately how track and field is in its current state. It's obviously pretty underserved, underfunded, underappreciated for what it is. And there were a lot of kids just kind of doing it on their own, trying to figure it out. And I literally remember leaving the meet that night and I was like, screw it, I'm going to start private coaching. I'm going to see if I can help kids either earn opportunities or show them opportunities that they might not have had before. And literally overnight, I just decided to start private coaching. And then I wouldn't even say slowly exploded. It very quickly picked up a lot of steam. I think mostly because I was the only private coach in Maine that I was aware of anyway at the time. And once we had one kid get good, another kid wanted to get good, and then another kid wanted to get good. And it just became kind of a snowball effect. And suddenly I had 10, 12 throwers in Maine and we were kind of off and running.
What was that experience like getting to coach those throwers and getting them to go to the college level to compete on the collegiate level in throwing?
Yeah, I mean that's really what started to kind of fill my emotional bucket, if you will, and that's kind of when I started to figure out this is what I want to do. And obviously, it's hard to be self-employed and whatever entrepreneurial. I know a big thing was always like health insurance and benefits and things like that. When you're self-employed, that's a very hard thing to afford at times. So for me, it was really just kind of juggling a bunch of different priorities and opportunities and seeing kind of what could come of it. And thankfully it all kind of worked out. But I think that's when I again realized that's what I wanted to do. And I was pretty much dead set on finding a way to do it no matter what it took. And obviously that meant a lot of sacrifices and a lot of really long and hard days and whatever, working part-time and coaching full-time and all that kind of stuff, that the whole like grit your teeth thing. But I was at the end of the day very, very rewarding to help athletes transition into bigger opportunities.
What was that experience like for you to get to come back to your alma mater of Maine BlackBears and become the assistant track and field coach for throwing?
Yeah, I mean it was pretty special. Like I knew because the coach that retired, Gerhard Skull, he was my college coach. And after I had some success with Slingshot, it became, I guess, pretty apparent to him that he wanted me to take over for him. And I was pretty floored, to be honest with you. I think extremely highly of Coach Gerhard, and that was really an honor. And it was something where I just didn't know how I was going to be able to pull it off because I live in the Portland area, so like 2 hours from campus. And it was just one of those things where I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it. Obviously, having bills and growing up and all that kind of stuff, like things are expensive. Uh, as you've probably figured out by talking to other track people, we don't get rich doing this. So that was a stressor. But at the end of the day, it was all I could think about. Like I was working at the bank and all I wanted to do was get out and coach. Like I just couldn't wait for 4 o'clock anymore. And it got to the point where I was willing to make the sacrifice to just be like, screw it. I just got to do this. It's the only thing I want to do. And it all kind of worked out. I just took a leap of faith and blinked basically. And now I'm going into year 4 at Maine already. So we found a way to make it all work.
Of course, being an alumni, what was that experience like getting to take over that program that your coach that coached you?
Yeah, I mean that was well, first of all, he was there for whatever to estimate about 20 years. He was there for a long time. So I knew I had like big shoes to fill. I mean, he's coached pretty much everyone that I've ever known to throw at Maine. And I don't want to say there was some pressure, but it was like, hey, I was basically handpicked. I got to make sure this works. And I got to make sure that, you know, the legacy and tradition that he's built over such a long period of time, that I'm able to literally carry the torch forward and make sure that the program continues to grow and develop. And I mean, thankfully, over the last few years, I feel like we've done that and we are continuing to grow. So, but yeah, I mean, just really a tremendous honor. I mean, I graduated in 2014 from Maine, and basically to come back 6 years later, I pretty much had only been to Orono 1 or 2 times since then. Um, yeah, and then once I took over, it was probably 6 months of just insane nostalgia of like being back on campus. And then it was also a lot of like crash course kind of learning, because I mean, from going self-employed where I could pretty much do whatever I want to now working in, you know, another giant business similar to whatever Apple or Bank of America, just in a different context. You know, I had some growing pains, obviously, like anyone else that kind of dives in head first. And thankfully, I kind of figured it out little by little and got some traction. And of course, Gerhard being there for me the whole time, like if I had questions or anything, he's always been there to support me. So
Coming to coach at Maine BlackBears, what was that experience like getting to coach those future BlackBears that put on that same uniform that you put on?
yeah, I mean that, well, it's actually kind of funny. I mean, that's something that I don't really think about because you tend to get lost in the, I don't know, the monotony of like we gotta go, we gotta compete, whatever. But when I actually like in the off season have time to think about it, that's kind of when it really hits that a lot of them don't realize. And I talk to them about this all the time. It's like you don't realize that you're living in the good old days currently, right? And being able to really try to appreciate the moments that you have with your teammates. And and I still keep in touch with a bunch of my former teammates, and I've gone to their weddings and stuff like that. And to be able to go back and kind of share those stories with the current throwers, to be like, this is a very real thing for you. Try to appreciate it. Try to slow time down as best you can, and really like take it in, I guess. Like being a Division I student athlete is extremely challenging. It's also a very in the course of your life, a very short period of time between 3 to 5 years, depending on kind of what happens for you. And I have just done the very best I can to help them understand how great of an opportunity is, and to really just enjoy the moments that they have, because they're
As
going
a
to take memories with them forever.
as a throwing coach, what is it like getting to coach those different disciplines like shot put, disc, and javelin throwing?
It's pretty hard because I mean, with throwing between shot and disc, and I guess you can put weight and hammer in a similar category, and then javelin. Like as a throws coach, you really do coach, I guess just call it 5 different events. So it is hard to juggle it all. Obviously, it takes quite a bit of I guess call it team culture and chemistry, and that's something that I've kind of tried to build up with the throwers, especially with the team we have, because we have so many throwers. When I first took over, we had 23, which is pretty rare for a college track team to have that many. Now we're down to about 16. I think I would still like to have it come up again just because I like having a large team, but it's very hard to manage all of that time. It takes the right athletes to understand, like, hey, there's 20 of us, one of him, class schedules, whatever coach has to do for administrative stuff during the day. So it takes a lot of just communication and collaboration to kind of make it all happen.
What does a typical track meet look like for you as a thrower coach?
I mean, track meets indoors are pretty straightforward because you only have shot and weight, and they go kind of right in order. So you could just kind of stay in one place. Once outdoor starts, it's quite a bit more challenging because you're competing as a coach anyway for, I don't know, 5 hours or so between, you have men's and women's everything. So men's and women's shot, disc, hammer, and javelin. So you basically are competing in 8 events in one day as a coach. So, and being able to try to manage all of that can be pretty challenging, but it's also really exciting. And that's part of why I love outdoor track so much, especially transitioning off of indoor, because there's so much more to do at the meet, and there's a lot more competition, and that's just kind of fun for me. But most facilities are set up where like javelin could be, I don't know, a quarter mile down the road, and shot is over here. And if you have both going on at the same time, again, that's a challenge, and that's where having a team really helps, because I can have one of the other athletes kind of help out and make it all happen as best we can.
What is that experience like getting to compete indoors in shot and disc throwing and stuff versus competing outdoors when you have more competitions?
Well, as an athlete, it's quite a bit more challenging if you throw. I mean, I haven't had anybody throw all 4 events outdoors because that's a little much, and they're all very different technically, so it'd be hard to pull all that off. But as an athlete, there's definitely an element of like being in shape and work capacity and being able to sustain effort throughout an entire afternoon. Because it's like if you're throwing shot, disc, and hammer, you're basically competing from, I don't know, usually the first event's at 10 a.m. and the third one's around 3 or 4. So it's hard, a lot of caffeine, a lot of just making sure the training was working on the front end to make sure you're in shape, all that kind of stuff.
Of course, in the outdoor events, how do you manage to balance being the coach for, let's say, shot put, but also javelin?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of lean on my team to help me pull all that off, because when we're that spread out, I you can't be in two places at once, obviously. So, but that's kind of the culture that we've built. Like I don't preach the team as mine. Like I treat it as us. And I think that has really stuck, especially with the throwers, to be able to go like, hey, like we collectively are competing today, and it's not just like you or me or whatever. So it helps to I don't want to say like share the responsibility, but at the same time, because ultimately I'm obviously responsible, but if a teammate can go down and help out, then and if that's our best option at the time, then that's what kind of has to happen. And thankfully everyone's on the same page with that. And I think, take a lot of pride in that.
As a throwing coach, what is that experience like getting to see those throwers that have their personal best, whether it's in shot put or javelin throwing?
Yeah, I mean that's the best part. That's why you do the work. And I think that's what's kind of nice about track and throwing in general versus a lot of other like team field kind of sports, just because it's very black and white, right? It's like you either threw, ran, jumped, whatever, this, or you didn't, right? So I think that's the best part, is it's a very measurable sport. You can track progress over time. You can see that you're improving or staying the same or getting worse. So it's very easy to track progress that way. And for the right personality, it ends up being a really great sport to I don't know, like hone your craft, so to speak. Because it's like the better you get technically, the stronger you get. Like it all tends to be a direct correlation with improvement.
Can you talk about, of course, the culture that you built for the throwing program at UMaine?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that I try to, I guess, preach for culture at Maine is like really just having a team atmosphere with somewhat high expectations. Because again, it's like we want to compete, we want to win, we want to break records, we want to do all that kind of stuff. And I think having that team environment allows a lot of that to happen. Like I know even with some of the throwers that we've had over the last couple of years, we've had 6 school record holders in the last 3 years. So we've done a lot of kind of rewriting the record books. And after some of those things happen, I try to make sure that we celebrate that as a team and not like an individual accomplishment, because I don't think a lot of those records and a lot of those performances would happen just like in isolation on an island, right? Like having a competitive training environment, having supportive teammates, all that kind of stuff comes back in a big way in big moments.
Of course, as a throwing coach, what is an alumni? What is that feeling like seeing those throwers set those records and set in those record books of UMaine?
Yeah, I mean that's the best feeling as far as I'm concerned in coaching, is seeing progress. And I guess that's the point. But being able to go in and like rewrite record books and change, I mean, I can't remember the exact year that Maine started having track, but it was a very, 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 very long time ago. So we're a program with a lot of history, and it's really fun to see like erasing records from like 1970 or 1940 something or whatever it is. So like just the measurable progress stuff is fun. And then, just having pride in the school, the logo, the program, all that kind of stuff makes it all that much more special to know like you're having an impact on, well, your alma mater. Like what you're doing is working, is being successful. And then obviously for other alums and people from the track team that are, paying attention and still following along, it's a pretty special feeling to know that you're just having an impact in general on a school that meant so much to you.
Who are some of the teams that you compete against each week in competitions and throwing competitions?
Well, and I guess that's where track's a little different that way too, where we don't have like regularly scheduled meets versus specific teams. Like our conference doesn't set up our schedule. We can kind of freely set it up. But generally we compete with, at the very least, all the schools in America East. So having an America East Conference championship, that's obviously where every team in that conference would go and compete. But like during the regular season, we could go anywhere really. I mean, we could compete in like this past spring, we went to North Carolina, we went to the Raleigh Relays, and saw teams that we would never see in New England and be able to kind of compete against whatever a higher level program. Because for us being basically a mid-major program, having our athletes compete against Power Five athletes, for example, is a really nice kind of measuring stick, especially when you start to realize like we're being competitive with them, right? Like we're beating some of their athletes here and there, and just our progress is being shown, I guess, against a higher level of competition. So, but yeah, I mean, it could be, you can compete against anyone. I mean, if you go to a meet like the Penn Relays, or like we were talking about the Raleigh Relays, it's like there's schools there from all over the country. So like where you're from doesn't really matter. And I think that's kind of what's fun too about track and having it be such a black and white sport. You could be a Division III athlete and be better than Division I athletes, and you can be a low level D1 athlete and be better than nationally recognized logos in schools from whatever. So it is interesting that way. It's very untraditional compared to most other team sports.
As a throwing coach, what is that experience like getting to coach in that Raleigh relay?
I mean, that was pretty cool. It's a really awesome, again, feeling as an alum to like have Maine jerseys go to a competition like that. Competing against a lot of schools from like the ACC and other whatever Power Five schools, and having success. Again, like very rewarding to like travel all the way down there, get all the logistics figured out. Obviously, when we travel, it's kind of a big production. Like our team is large in a lot of ways. It's larger than many like hockey and basketball teams. So a lot goes into it, and it's very rewarding to have it all pay off.
What is that experience like getting to coach against those big programs in throwing, in track, like UCLA?
Yeah, I mean, you have to obviously keep things in perspective. So that's part of it. But at the same time, with me being competitive, and again, as just like part of our culture, like even if we're gonna run into not even necessarily teams, but like athletes that we know, like, hey, we're probably not gonna beat them, but that doesn't mean we're not gonna try. Like at least if they're gonna beat us or one of our individual athletes, like just make them earn it, right? It's like just don't. I really try to make sure that I guess what's the word or phrase I'm looking for, like starstruck, for example, like when you have like Maine jerseys go to a big meet and you see like whatever, we'll just say Power Five schools, you tend to get a little I guess starstruck. You're like, wow, that's a big logo, big program, whatever. And it's like, yeah, cool. Like you're competing against them in like 20 minutes. Like, let's go. Right. So there's a piece of that. And it's again really exciting to see a Maine jersey competing against a Power Five school.
What does that recruitment process look like for those prospective throwers looking to go into college?
Yeah, I mean, well, the recruiting process is pretty interesting as a whole. I mean, for me, trying to build basically a mid-major program into a program that can compete with Power Five schools or whatever higher level schools, there's it's definitely a challenge. It's hard to sometimes convince whatever higher tiered athletes to not necessarily look at whatever the massively funded Power Five schools at times, but yeah, I would say the biggest piece outside of just generally trying to get people to acknowledge that we kind of exist is you have to be a student athlete first, and that's a really hard thing for some people to grasp, because I've even heard recruits, or even when I was private coaching or whatever, people are like, oh, well, I throw far, I don't need to go to school, or I don't need to study that hard, like I can just whatever, the whole C's get degrees thing. That's definitely not a thing that we subscribe to here. I know at least for the track team, we are historically very academically high achieving. And I think that's partly just because of the personalities that our sport tends to attract, but also for the academics that people want to study, like whether that's nursing or computer science or engineering or just anything in STEM, really. track kind of allows the flexibility to study those things, whereas in larger team sport environments, like whatever, football is kind of the one that comes off the top of my head, it's hard to allow somebody to like study nursing while playing football when you have internships and everything else that's kind of going on. So track tends to support that. But yeah, as far as recruiting, I mean, academics tend to be a bigger piece of it than people realize sometimes, until it's unfortunately kind of too late.
What does that official visit look like for those prospective throwers coming to UMaine and seeing the throwing program?
Yeah, I mean, for official visits, I mean, I guess from beginning to end, it's obviously a lot of logistics of figuring out how to get them up here. So that's either like coordinating usually flights and all that kind of stuff to get into Bangor. And then pretty much once they're up here, we have them for a couple days. I try to be someone in the middle. Like I want to obviously be involved, but I also want them to be able to spend time with the athletes, because ultimately what you're really trying to figure out on those official visits is the school a good fit for me? Do they have what I want to study? Do I get along with the coach? Is the coach going to stay? And is the coach going to be there? You know, if you can get a sense for the team culture and environment, and if you're going to get along with your potential future teammates. So I really am like hands-on for a little bit. Like they'll get there, we'll go out to dinner, whatever, chat about some things, and I'll just kind of hand them off to the athletes. And oh, sorry about that. Had a call come in. And I'll just kind of hand them off to the athletes and, and see if it's a good fit. And then obviously being able to follow up with the athletes after the fact and be like, hey, what'd you think of them? Do you think they'd fit in? Because like I said, with us having a team culture within a individual sport, not every personality is going to be a match for what we're trying to build here. So
Of course, as a throwing coach, what is that feeling like seeing those freshmen put on that Maine uniform for the first time that you put on?
that's another interesting one that I haven't really thought about. But yeah, I mean, that is a special feeling, and it's I guess one that again, when you kind of reflect on it again, because I always go back to kind of like the student athlete experience we're providing to our student athletes, and being able to kind of reflect on, like, because I'm 32, so it wasn't terribly long ago when I was wearing the uniform and having that student athlete experience. And it is pretty cool knowing that they're kind of living through the same moments that I consistently think about about like being back in college. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a like a milestone kind of achievement to get to wear a collegiate Division I uniform. And especially for me, my alma mater, it's like just knowing that they're going to end up with a lot of the same experiences and memories is pretty cool.
Of course, what is it like getting to see your seniors putting on that uniform for the last time and going into whether it's professional track and field, going to the Olympics, or going into their career paths?
Well, and that one is sad. Usually, uh, I think that's I told my wife this pretty much every single year. That's like the best and worst part of coaching, is seeing the athletes develop over a long period of time and actually get to move into a career. And at the same time, it's so sad knowing that you're not going to like literally see them every day like I had for the last couple of years. And that's it's challenging. It really is. I mean, I'm generally a pretty emotional dude, so the end of seasons are very, very hard. And it's obviously, it's like hard for me, it's hard for them. I know I speak to, or have spoken to, a lot of my athletes in the past around just like what that transition looks like leaving college. And for athletes, so much of our identity tends to be tied around sports. So it's like when it's over, like, what am I? What do I do? What am I passionate about? Like, how am I going to get a job or pay rent or buy a house, or like all those life things that kind of come very, very quickly after graduating. So I just try to be there for them if they need anything like that. But yeah, end of seasons are hard. It's definitely hard knowing, especially for them, because I think for throwing, there will come a time in your career where it's like it is your last throw. And that's kind of a weird thing to think about, but kind of same. I don't know. I mean, even like for football or whatever, it's like it's the last game you ever play in this uniform, or for baseball, like your last at bat. Stuff like that. It's pretty. It's heavy. It is.
As a throwing coach, what is it like getting to see those athletes go on to represent Team USA or Canada and go to the Olympics?
Yeah, well, our most recent experience is, well, at least Canadian nationals. Like we haven't had any, or I haven't coached any athletes that have made a national team uh yet. I mean, hopefully that will happen at some point in my career. I'm still pretty early into this. A lot of the coaches that I know that have been highly, highly successful have pretty much my lifetime and coaching experience. So hopefully at one point that'll definitely happen. But at least in the interim, having, like we've had Mackenzie Wilson this year competed, well, and she did last year too at the Canadian National Championship. So getting our athletes to national level meets is also a really rewarding feeling, and it's a rare feeling. Like it's really hard to get to that point. Like the work required to compete at that level is a lot, and you have to be willing to do that work. And obviously not everybody is. Not everyone's kind of cut out for it. It's extremely challenging. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely been probably one of the most rewarding experiences of my college career is getting to watch kind of her develop, and then getting to compete at a national stage against Olympians is really cool, especially knowing that, she trains in Orono, right? Like she throws for the University of Maine. So that's again, really rewarding, really rare. And hopefully it's just something that we'll get to continue to do more of in the years to come.
What are some of your future plans for the U Maine's track and field throwing program moving forward?
Well, that's a good question. I know when I came into the job, I kind of came in with like a 3 or 4 year plan, and we're going into year 4 now. So hopefully a lot of these things will happen. But I know in my first year, I came in 2020, which was of course peak COVID. So it was like, well, what are you gonna do? I mean, my only goal my first year was like try to get some athletes on the top 10 list, score at conference, like really kind of entry level goals of like, can we get this thing off the ground? In my second year, I really wanted to try to break a school record. I wanted to have an athlete become all conference. So I kind of like in my head had this like step ladder of like, if we're growing, these are the things that will happen. So thankfully in our second year, we had a school record broken. We had all conference throwers. And then in our third year, this year, my goal was, again, more school records, an Americas championship, at least in one of the events. And thankfully this year we won 3, and get somebody to the NCAA preliminary round. And we did that this year too. So going into year 4, the goal is hopefully we'll get more people into the NCAA preliminary round, and hopefully have a black bear advance to the Division I national championships in year 4. And that's, kind of rapid fire growth for a pretty like isolated rural Division I track program to put our jersey out there like that. But that's the goal. That's the point, right? Like you're trying to develop a program to compete at that level. And, by having, I guess, that much success so quickly, it's going to be obviously hard to sustain it to be able to compete at that level all the time. But I think part of that is just kind of knowing the process. Like even coaches that have coached national champions and All-Americans and whatever, it doesn't really happen on a annual basis. Like a lot of things have to go really, really right. So, but yeah, hopefully this year, yeah, we'll have a black bear uniform out in Oregon at the Division I national championships. And then going into year 5, I don't know, that's too far away for now. But
Of
so
course,
far, that's kind of been the journey.
what advice would you give those freshmen that are entering their first year of college track and field as a thrower?
Yeah, well, I think for freshmen, I don't know if I'm untraditional in this, but I really just like to have them compete. I know there's obviously a lot of programs I'll just like redshirt them their freshman year or whatever, but for freshmen, I really try to talk to them about like goal setting is a big one, and like your purpose in this. Like, is it just to like have fun, or is it like to compete? Because obviously they're not conflicting ideologies, but at the same time, it's like, you know, you got to compete to win, right? You got to compete to get better. You got to, continue going against higher competition, especially in the throws. Because if you end up going to a meet and you don't compete and you just kind of go to have fun, like you could very well not make the final. And that takes away 3 throws that you could have had measured for whatever, another PR or another opportunity to qualify for another meet. So, but I really like for freshmen to kind of like dive in head first and be like, kind of get beat up a little bit. I think is kind of how I've even transparently put it to some of the freshmen, like, hey, we're going to go against throwers that are astronomically better than you. And you're just going to have to kind of get in there and feel that pressure of being in the ring. And those are all learning experiences. And I think it's important that the freshmen get that, because that can help, project the rest of their college career. And it kind of gives them a starting point to continue building off of. And so far that strategy has really worked, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, and for freshmen too, like time management's a big piece. Understanding basically the academic side of being a student athlete is really important, and that's something that I obviously try to help them with the best I can. And yeah, and just understanding that your grades are important, eligibility is important. Like if you're failing classes, you can't compete, so that kind of defeats the whole purpose. But yeah, freshman year is a lot of growing up for a lot of people. It's a lot of transition and change, and it is hard. It's very challenging. So I just try to be there for them the best I can.
What advice would you give those college throwers out there that are looking to go on to play for Team USA or Canada and make the Olympics?
Yeah, or move on. I mean, I have friends that have gone on to compete in the Olympics or Olympic trials and have continued to compete post collegiately, and it's basically kind of similar to what I said before. Like you have to be willing to do the work and understand the work that goes into it. But post collegiately, it's even more challenging because you don't have the bubble that I call like college training, where it's like you don't have athletic trainers and doctors and whatever, a bunch of other resources around you for free anymore. Suddenly it's like you got to pay for that stuff, and you have bills, and you got to pay rent, and there's a lot of enormous adversity when it comes to like working a full-time job and then go, yeah, now I got to go train for 2 hours. So it's really hard. And then when you look at the level of competition and what it takes to actually get there, is, I don't want to say it's insurmountable, but it's really, really difficult, and you have to be really, really patient and understand that development is a long-term journey. Like if you want to get to those levels, it's very rare to do that at like 22, 23, 24 years old. Usually it's like you got to stick it out till you're like 28, 29, 30. And that's really, really hard.
What advice would you give those college athletes out there that are looking to get into college coaching after their career?
Well, for coaching, that's a good question too. I mean, I usually kind of recommend my path, not that it was right or anything like that, but it tends to be the first door to open. So it's like if you go back to your high school and find a way to contribute, especially if you had a good relationship with your coach, which you definitely should have if you went on to compete in college. But just finding ways to give back, like finding ways to go back to your old high school, help the program out. And then who knows if it turns into private coaching like I did or whatever. You can at least gain experience pretty quickly doing that. Obviously, of all of that is going to be volunteer. So you're not going to make money, most likely, coaching at your high school. So if it's one of those things, it's like, you want to do it, there's definitely a bit of like earning your stripes, so to speak. So you have to go through a lot of the volunteer stuff, and that'll probably take 2 or 3 years to like kind of build accomplishment, and that's really the only way to kind of climb the ladder.
What advice would you give those college coaches out there that are looking to become throwing coaches for a college program?
Well, I think you really have to invest yourself in the sport, because with it being such a technical sport, like you really have to understand basically what it takes. I know for me personally, a lot of my coaching at the high school and then privately was just kind of like winging it and seeing what works and what doesn't. And the things that worked, keep doing them. The things that aren't working, stop doing them. And then as I started getting into more like professional development stuff through whatever different governing bodies and whatever, there's a lot to learn with like biomechanics, physics, kinesiology, how the body works, how the body moves. Weightlifting is a big part of it. So understanding weightlifting technique. So there's a lot of little pieces that kind of go into the jigsaw puzzle of putting it all together. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're invested in it and you're passionate about it, it's generally not easy to do the work, but it makes it a lot more palatable to go through it all.
What advice would you give those coaches out there that are looking to coach at their alma mater?
Ooh, I guess I would say either networking, staying in touch. I mean, it's a very, very rare opportunity because I mean, you'd have to obviously take over for someone else. So the timing just kind of has to be right. You have to earn a reputation on the front end to, make you employable. So yeah, I mean, if it's a goal for people, and I know for a lot of people it is, and that's why they tend to job hop, I think, for a lot of college coaches, is they're looking for whatever that dream job might be and whatever that means to them. I mean, for me, mine was coaching at Maine because that's where I went to school and that's the program that I care about more than any other one. So I was kind of fortunate that way, but I think the big thing is just like keep your ear on the ground, stay in touch with the coaches that are there, the administrations that's there, make sure you leave on like a really great note because I know that's a big one too. And just, staying in the loop with what's going on at your alma mater is important. If it's important to you, if that's something you really wanted to do.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with the Maine track and field program app?
Yeah, our primary handles for the whole track team are Maine XCTF. And then for me personally, I have at Black Bear Throws, as obviously the school program. I still have at Slingshot Throws, which is my private club and coaching. And those are the two primary ones that'll kind of keep you up to date with what I have going on.
Thank you again, Coach Brian Woodbury, for your interview and best luck in your future as the Maine BlackBears assistant track and field throwing coach.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach Brian, for your interview and best luck in your future.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.